Welcome to the fourth IMEC Make in India conference on healthcare and pharmaceuticals, hosted by Impact Media and Events Corporation in association with Tendentia. I am your host, Vipul Jani, founder director for IMEC. We have so far done 3 Make in India themed Canada-India bilateral conferences so far on travel, tourism and hospitality, on IT and manufacturing, and then on infrastructure. Today is the fourth conference in our Make in India series, and the fifth such conference will take place next month on March 29 on renewable energy. These conferences are actively supported by the High Commission of India. We sincerely thank the High Commissioner, the Deputy High Commissioner, and the senior officials at the High Commission, as well as all the sector-specific vice presidents for Invest India for participating in these events and helping us put together these events. Today's topic is what we are all talking about for the last 2 years, health. It has been on top of everybody's minds since at least March 2020, when the pandemic upended all aspects of our life and work. Canada and India both faced serious challenges and have faced them in their own unique ways. How India developed and supplied vaccines to the world, vaccinated almost 130 crore people in such a short time, and ramped up its health infrastructure under such trying circumstances is a big silver line in an otherwise very dark COVID cloud. As number 3 globally for pharmaceutical production, as the largest provider of generic drugs manufacturer, as the 10th biggest market globally for medical tourism, with more than 3,000 pharma companies and a strong network of over 10,500 manufacturing facilities, India offers tremendous opportunities for growth in the healthcare and pharmaceutical sectors, both for Canada and the rest of the world. The Make in India initiative and 100% of FDI allowed under the automatic route for greenfield pharma, plus the 70% FDI allowed for brownfield pharma. This is the right time for Canada to tap into the emerging India story. Canadian institutional investors, pension funds, and others are actively investing in India, now touching almost $60 billion. It's time to do the same in the healthcare and pharma sectors as well. Both countries will be healthier and happier because of it. On a side note, 2022 being India's 75th year, we are celebrating with 3 specific events. India at 75 Corporate Award Gala on May 29, India at 75 Food Festival on August 28, and India at 75 Dance Festival on October 16. We also host a Canada-India Education Forum with Canadian colleges and universities. You can find more about all our work on our website, imec.biz. Lastly, let me thank all the IMEC sponsors, without whose support none of this would be possible. Our presenting sponsor, Tendentia, and other sponsors, Skylink Capital Corp, Seneca College, Efficience Canada, SBI Canada Bank, Home Hotel and Resort, Akal Insurance, ICICI Bank Canada, One Place, Pavi Bining, and Natu Oil for their support. As for the format, each speaker will get about 8 to 10 minutes each for their remarks or their presentations, including a couple of questions from us, followed by a brief panel discussion at the end. With that, please join me in welcoming His Excellency Mr. Ajay Bisaria, the High Commissioner of India to Canada, for his welcome remarks. Over to you, Ajay.
Thank you, Vipulji. Namaskar. Good morning to friends in Canada. Good evening to folks in India joining us. It's an absolute delight to welcome you for this fourth Make in India conference on the healthcare and pharmaceutical sector, which Vipul just mentioned. And we are very happy to partner with IMEC, which has been quite a dynamo in this sector and working to promote Indian exports. and for organizing this event along with us. And special thanks, of course, to Mr. Vipul Jani, the founder and director of IMEC, for putting this event together. I also want to recognize and welcome all my co-panelists who are joining us today. I see that special welcome to Mr. Jim Kyon, who's here as president of the Canadian Generic Pharma Association. My friends from Ottawa joining in, special welcome for them. I see Mr. Atul Agarwal here, and of course, Dr. Pradeep Merchant, who would join in if he's not in already. And of course, welcome to my friends from Invest India, our experts who always a great mine of information and which they'll be sharing with you. And welcome to Mr. Akshay Lal, President of Lal Pharmaceuticals, and Mr. Lester Fernandez of ICICI Bank. So it's great that we've got together again for yet another conference. Vipul mentioned that this is the fourth in the series. We've had those in infrastructure, in travel and tourism, in IT and manufacturing, and more coming up. And all these are available on our social media and on the net. So if anyone is interested, they could refer to these. In terms of timing, I think this is excellent. We are possibly seeing and hopefully seeing the end of the COVID pandemic, which has been with us for 2 years. What it has underlined to the world is that India is the pharmacy of the world. India is the vaccine maker of the world. And what I thought I'd do is just make some very broad comments on India's healthcare sector and how it's emerged before we get into a deep dive with Invest India on all the investment and export opportunities. India's healthcare industry has grown at a very impressive compound annual growth rate of about 22% since 2016, since even before the pandemic. And at this rate, we expect to be at a level of about $372 billion in 2022. And so healthcare is a very important sector for India and one of the largest sectors in India's economy, both in terms of revenue and employment. And the way the experts divide the healthcare industry, it's hospitals, medical devices and equipment, health insurance, clinical trials, telemedicine, and medical tourism. And all these market segments, I think, are expected to diversify as our population ages with a growing middle class, and which increasingly focuses on preventive healthcare. Besides the lifestyle diseases that are a higher proportion of overall disease, cholesterol, blood pressure, obesity, poor diet, alcohol in urban areas do boost the demand for specialized care services. So India is ranked about third worldwide for pharmaceutical production by volume and 14th by value. And what we have today is a domestic pharmaceutical industry, which is formidable, with a strong network of about 3,000 drug companies and 10,500 manufacturing units. With about 70% of India's population in rural areas, pharma companies have immense opportunities in that market as well. Demand for generic medicines in rural markets has seen a very sharp growth, and various companies are investing, as we understand, in the distribution networks in rural areas. India today, in terms of the global market, is the largest provider of generic drugs globally. Our pharmaceutical sector supplies over 50% of the demand for various vaccines, 40% of the generic demand in the US, and 25% of all medicine in the UK. So globally, India ranks third in terms of pharmaceutical production by volume. The low cost of medical services has resulted in a rise in India's in medical tourism as well, and attracting patients from all across the world. And whichever geography of the world I've served in, medical tourism has been on the rise, whether it was in Europe or even in South Asia, in Pakistan. Moreover, India has emerged as a hub for R&D activities for international players due to the relatively low cost of clinical research. And therefore, medical value travel, especially wellness tourism, has very strong and bright prospects. Vipul alluded to the overall conditions that we are stepping into in the next few months. We've had a catalyzing and seminal event in the health sector, which has been the COVID pandemic. And we hope to see the end of it. But what it has done is changed attitudes towards health and hygiene and the way we deal with health services. Health insurance has changed, fitness and nutrition, as well as health monitoring, medical checkups have all taken a digital turn. And I think this will define the way we go forward, as the pandemic has accelerated the movement we were making towards digital technologies, including telemedicine. What we also see is a growing emphasis on public-private partnerships, particularly in India's healthcare sector. Overall, what the government has attempted is deep structural and sustained reforms in India's healthcare sector as well. And India is also trying to be a hub for spiritual and wellness tourism, Ayurveda, yoga. And all these factors make India's healthcare industry very ripe for investment at this point. If you see the recent policies of the government of India, they've announced a very strong measures for encouraging FDI, foreign direct investment in the health sector. India's FDI regime has been liberalized extensively. We are permitting up to 100% investments in the automatic route, which is non-resident companies can invest in India without any approvals and permissions, and also in the hospital sector and in the manufacture of medical devices. In the pharmaceutical sector, FDI is permitted up to 100% in greenfield projects and 74% in brownfield projects under this automatic route. So the results are showing on the ground. As of June 2021, India received more than $7 billion of FDI in inflows in hospitals and diagnostic centers. And FDI inflows for drugs and pharmaceuticals stood at about $18 billion. And all this is in the context of a huge rise in overall investments, FDI in India last year, which has hit over $82 billion. So together, these factors create huge opportunities for investments in general and particularly in the healthcare sector. And what we are expecting is a boom which goes even beyond the kind of rates we've seen. There's an expectation that $500 billion is expected to be spent on medical infrastructure by 2030. And this you should see in the context of huge investments in infrastructure in general. Between 2019 and 25, $1.4 trillion is expected to be invested in infrastructure. By 2040, more than $4 trillion. So it's a hugely ambitious infrastructure investment plan in which healthcare is very important. Also, the idea is to make India a global healthcare hub. The world's largest government-funded healthcare scheme, Ayushman Bharat, has been rolled out and was launched in 2018. And the government also aims to increase healthcare spending to 3% of the GDP by 2020. And given India's GDP of $3 trillion plus, that is a huge amount. Investments in healthcare infrastructure is set to rise, benefiting both the hard hospital sector and the soft infrastructure sector like R&D and education. We also have the Ayushman Bharat digital mission aimed at creating a seamless online platform that would enable interoperability within the healthcare ecosystem. And what the digital system ABDM now connects the digital health solutions of hospitals across the country with each other. And the whole idea is that every citizen of India is now required to get a digital health ID, and their health record will be digitally protected. On the wider policy front, the Indian government is undertaking huge structural reforms across sectors in land, labor, liquidity, capital, but also particularly in the healthcare sector. And the idea is to create very conducive policies for FDI. We also, under the Atmanirbhar Bharat program, and which is the Sustainable India or Self-Sustaining India program, have long and short-term measures, including production-linked incentives in the medical sector for boosting domestic manufacturing, both for the pharmaceutical and medical devices. And the union budget, which we announced very recently in February, envisages an investment of $11 billion plus for healthcare, and which is more than 16-17% of last year's estimates. And overall, that means that public investment by the government in this sector is growing, and the whole idea is to crowd in the private investment through these public investments, and also in that process, FDI. And the last point I wanted to make was about technology. There have been huge advancements and disruptive technologies like artificial intelligence, wearables, and mobile technologies, along with the Internet of Things, which offer several avenues for investment. And the key segments where new opportunities are likely to emerge for health technology players include the development of tools to facilitate emergency care and improvements to medical infrastructure through technology-based optimization. And that includes expanding wearable devices to track health conditions and developing patient-facing mobile health applications, as well as greater integration of AI, robots, and blockchain technologies. Just briefly on the India-Canada partnership, this is a strategic partnership since 2015, being led by the very strong economic partnership. We have trade that has reached $12 billion annually. Canadian portfolio investments in India have jumped over $60 billion. Today, India and Canada are strong Indo-Pacific democracies which have a lot to do each other. We are G20 economies with a great deal of economic coordination. And with COVID-19, with the pandemic, we have seen that particularly free market democratic societies need to coordinate with each other. The pandemic brought into focus the need for coordination in the pharmaceutical sector, particularly for India as the pharmacy and the vaccine maker of the world. And India did provide during the pandemic medicines and vaccines to Canada, just as Canada stepped up to help India during a severe second wave with oxygen plants and other such equipment. So there's a great deal of coordination between the two countries and the private sectors. For instance, a Canadian company, Providence Therapeutics from Calgary, it coordinated with Bharat Biotech and Covaxin, and also struck a deal with Biological E, a company in Hyderabad, for the transfer of technology from the Canadian company, which will sell 30 million doses of its vaccine candidate, which is called PTX COVID-19B. So India's capacity of 2 billion vaccines is being enhanced by Canada's technological coordination, and that's one example of what we can do. So I wish you a very productive discussion, and all the very best. Thank you for joining us.
Great. Thank you so very much, Commissioner. That was wonderful remarks, and you laid out the field for all of us, covering all the entire gamut from just pharmaceuticals to the role of other technologies at play. So I will continue with the conference. If share the screen here. So next up is Srividya, who is the Assistant Vice President and Sector Head, Pharmaceuticals and Biotechnology from Invest India. Srividya leads the Pharmaceutical and Biotech Cluster in Invest India. She's one of the founding members of the world's most awarded investment promotion agency. In her more than 6 years of experience, Srividya has successfully targeted and facilitated multiple projects across all priority sectors of Make in India. This has resulted in generating thousands of jobs and billion-dollar investments in the country. Srividya has strong regional expertise in the US and West European markets and has played an instrumental role in deepening business ties between the business communities of India, America, and Western Europe. Srividya graduated with an honors degree in commerce and accountancy from the prestigious University of Delhi. Before in Invest India, Srividya was an investment banker with the Development Bank of Singapore. Just briefly about Invest India. Invest India is a national investment promotion and facilitation agency set up under the aegis of the Department for Promotion of Industry and Internal Trade, Ministry of Commerce and Industry. Invest India focuses on sector-specific investor targeting and development of new partnerships to enable sustainable investments in India. Invest India also actively works with several Indian states to build capacity as well as bring in global best practices in investment targeting, promotion, and facilitation. Invest India was set up in 2009 as a non-profit venture. So I will stop screen sharing here. Srividya, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tejas, and thank you to the IMEC team, Vipul, and everyone. Absolutely a pleasure to be with you today. And Excellency, absolutely a pleasure to hear you. And I think to hear the India growth story. So I'll just take on from what you just mentioned. And I think just to reiterate on the entire India opportunity or the India growth story, I like to say that. So I'll just quickly start off. So Rajat, we'll just move to the next slide, please. I think we've already talked about, so as I said, I like to say that India growth story, and I think with the population of more than 1.4 billion and, world's largest democracy, I think over the past decade, the country has seen, a very integral integration into the entire global economy, which has been accompanied by, as I say, the economic growth. And India has now emerged as a global player in probably in every leading segment, be it number of startups or number of unicorns being created, or I can say that, adding to almost largest internet user base, or leading the way in the G20 by being the fastest growing economy. Ajat, next slide. I think while we talked about this entire growth story, the global economy and the growth, and I think we've all mentioned about it, that with the COVID pandemic, remained, hostage to a very heightened uncertainty. And in the wake of, the new COVID waves, which we have seen, the amount of supply chain snags we have heard about, High Commissioner also mentioned about the amount of logistic disruptions and so on and so forth. And including on top of that, the inflation, which have almost touched multi-highs in several economies. I think all these developments have over the period of time really tempered the momentum which we had seen in the globe, in terms of growth and investments across the regions. And I think in spite of the global headwinds we did see, I think Indian economy did manage to bounce back strongly with some strong GDP numbers, probably at point of time, surpassing some of the pre-pandemic levels as well. And as I see that, in the country, as we see, it continues to be on road to become the top 3 global economy by 2030. Rajat, next, please. I think as I talked about, I think I will more talk about this growth story because it is promising. And as I see that, it is not only it's India who's talking about, the world is talking about, the story and the growth which we are seeing. And I think when we talk about India's growth story, it is definitely incomplete with the kind of promising, interest we have received from the global FDI community. And again, the India's FDI story remains headstrong. Largely, it has been left by the strong investment sentiments, which have been fueled by, the large macroeconomic, stability which has been showcased. As the High Commissioner also mentioned, the large infrastructure developments which are being made, and large economic growth opportunities across various sectors like infrastructure, energy, and so on and so forth, which are coming in. And also the backbone, or I should say the supporting part of the entire scheme of things, which is the financial sector reforms to really lead that boost in the economic story. Which I think along with this, with all these factors coming in, I think we have been able to position India as a strong player. And especially in the COVID pandemic, when we've more often heard about the supply chain disruption, I think India has been able to put itself as a strong player in the global supply chain. Rajat, we'll move to the next slide, please. And I think today, if every country will talk about its economic growth story, and I think, it is impossible to miss a point that, while we have been, going through these 2 years of tough times, to be able to have such a resilient growth and to be able to continue that growth trajectory, it would have been impossible without the commitment and the leadership, especially with reference to the vaccination front. And I think it is a matter of an utmost pride that we were able to curb this pandemic and show the promise to the world that India has been able to, or is on the verge of overcoming this pandemic. And the vaccination drive itself has acted, as we are all talking about with the vaccination, about the booster dose. So I say that this entire vaccination, the inoculation front, which India has led, has actually acted as a booster shot, to the economic story we are talking about. And I think, as I said, India not only, I think, Vipul, I think you'll have to mute yourself. Vipul, are you able to hear me?
Yeah. Yes. Give me 1 second.
Go ahead, Srividya.
Thank you. So I think, as I said, this is the booster dose which was required to really build up that kind of economic growth momentum. And I think it was not only India, while it got benefited from this entire, vaccine manufacturing capabilities, but I think entire world, and as even the High Commissioner sir also mentioned, that, has been witness to it. And I think we have really lived up to the word of, India being the pharmacy of the world, or the India being the manufacturing hub or the vaccine manufacturing hub to the world, by, being able to provide made in India vaccine through one of our very important initiatives called Vaccine Maitri, to several countries through grants and commercial supplies and so on and so forth. So, that has been a game changer. So, Rajat, we'll move to our next slide, please. And I think as we all talk about the India growth story, and I think it is incomplete without one of the most promising aspect of the entire investment ecosystem, which is the startup, right? So the startup is right now in the globe, I think around the world, is going to be the backbone of development, of economic growth, prosperity, employment, and and development. So I think even though in India, and I think we clearly see that startup was never I will not really say that it was a recent phenomena which we saw, but I think it has been prevailing for decades. But I think in the current government, in the current in the last 1 decade, I think the kind of impetus which has been provided to the startup ecosystem has really helped us to take that next leap of faith in our economic development. And I think with the startup, we have seen that it has been able to give rise to several of industries. One of the industry which has also benefited the most with that kind of entrepreneurial mindset being there in the country was definitely the theme we are talking about today, which is pharma and healthcare. And at the same time, these entrepreneur mindset and these sectors and the industries which we were able to develop because of the entrepreneur mindset has helped us evolve, in this entire phase of evolution which we have seen as a country. And as you see that, India is right now currently the third largest startup hub in the world after US and China. And at least I see that, and as an institution, as Invest India, and holding the beacon for the country's investment, we see that at least the pace of this startup growth is definitely not showing any signs of slowing down. Rajat, next slide, please. So, as I just talked about this entire, the initiatives which have been come in. I think one of the most promising initiatives of this government, in the last 1 decade, we have seen is the Make in India initiatives. While we talk about in Make in India, is definitely eventually, touching upon the entire investment growth story. And I think as we talk about the investment growth story, definitely within those, scheme of activities within the investment side, one definitely expects that there will be certain sectors which are actually going to ride the wave of growing optimism of this entire India story. And I think as you currently see in front of you, that there are about 24 sectors which have been listed. And I think if I were to give you a view of what are the broad themes which currently India is looking at, it is I will categorize into six areas, which is of course IT and technology, infrastructure, defense, energy, healthcare, which we are currently talking about, and food and agriculture. I think these are the themes and areas which is really going to help India as the country to take that next leap of faith when we are talking about the new India, and especially as the Prime Minister has also laid out in his speech during the last Independence Day, that India is going to celebrate its independence this year. And I think now there is also a roadmap which is being set forth for India at 2047, which we achieve 100 years of independence. And that's, the next 25 years are going to play a very important role, in terms of the growth story of India. Rajat, we'll quickly move to the next slide, please. I think, High Commissioner has already covered most part of the entire, the pharma and healthcare story. And I think I just, won't take much time. And I think, out of all sectors of Make in India, definitely pharmaceutical is one of the most promising sectors. And because of the COVID and every, challenge we had to face, I think we've realized the importance, and we've realized that as every aspect of probably healthcare industry has received that global attention during the COVID-19. And, it's matter of great pride that, Indian pharmaceutical industry rose to this challenge, was continued to strive, and it also continued to find new solutions to this crisis. And, it really, it was the work of the Indian, pharma companies that really brought India to be known, renowned, and, known as the pharmacy of the world. And of course, as I said, I think it is not only possible, with private, the industry taking the lead. Of course, the government of India has also played a very important role to really support the growth of this sector, even before the pandemic and even, amid the pandemic. And there were several initiatives which were launched, during the, during pre-pandemic and pandemic time, schemes like production-linked incentive schemes, supporting the entire infrastructure development, especially of the bulk drug parks, or I should say API parks in the country, introduction of a draft policy of research and development, which is dedicatedly focusing on encouraging and strengthening the innovations, in the country. As I said, as you see, as I think we've all mentioned, that we're all known at present, India is one of the largest provider of generic drugs globally. Indian companies are almost catering half of the global demand for various vaccines across. And I think almost 40% of the generic demand in the US is fulfilled by India. And I think because of all this the benefits which the government is able to provide, the kind of the therapeutic categories, and we've been able to manufacture the kind of human capital, skill and technology and scale we have in the country. We have seen that this sector continues to be one of the most attractive sectors in terms of attracting foreign direct investments. And of course, some of the countries remain, some of the countries like US and UK and Japan compares to be a leading, source of FDI inflows. Rajat, will you quickly move to the next slide, please? I think as we talked about, this entire, our own strength, and I think how we've been able to, support the world with the pharma, thing. I think India's definition of whole wellness does not really pertain to own just being physical wellness of its own country and its citizens. And I think there has always been a belief that wellness is for the entire mankind. And I think it was, again, during the backdrop of this entire COVID and everything, we've seen that the country continued to export essential drugs and medical equipments to more than 150 countries. Even Vice Commissioner had mentioned, Canada was also one of the beneficiaries. Canada also has helped India and during the time of the pandemic and the second wave with C. And I think we did the same with some of our initiatives like Vaccine Maitri. So I think while we've seen, as you see that currently, I just wanted to quickly focus on the exports opportunity which are there currently for India. As Indian pharmaceutical industry almost earns more than 50% of its revenue from its exports. I think largely also because of having the biggest strength of also having largest number of US FDA plants in India. While formulations and biologics is one of the topmost segment, which we export from the country. So as I said, I think formulation and biologics remains one of the major key segment when it comes to exports. But we've seen a renewed interest, especially, and I think this is something which is going to be the game changer when it comes to the pharmaceutical exports from India, and the need for is all the traditional medicine side, which is of course some, personally our Prime Minister has also been, strongly advocating for. And I think traditional medicine products are something which have been seen that they are gaining significance, have seen a growing demand at the global level. The one thing I definitely would want to mention before I move to the next slide, I think it was absolutely a matter of pride for us that, recently World Health Organization has also, endorsed the efforts which India has done in the space of traditional medicine and herbal medicine. And we've recently seen an announcement from the WHO that they are looking at setting up a global center for traditional medicines in India. Next slide, Rajat. Okay, so I think while we talk about India, Canada collaborations, and I think personally I see a very strong collaboration between these countries, in some of these segments which which has been just put forth here, which are generics, which of course India's strength. But I think two segments where I would like to specifically focus on is on the bulk drug and the vaccine and the biologic side of things. I think the bulk drugs, or which I say in the APIs. I think this is something personally the government and the country is seeing focus in the current global scenario. Especially when it comes to becoming self-reliant in terms of the key starting materials and the APIs and the intemperatures. I think, and we are going to see a renewed focus also in terms from the global manufacturers also, who are also looking at making India, their home for, especially in the bulk drug space. And I think the government and the industry has been working towards setting up that kind of ecosystem with reference to human capital, infrastructure, and other regulatory compliances which are required, to really scale up the bulk drug space. The second thing, which I said, which I would want to focus on is on the vaccines and the biologic side. And I think this is where the expertise, the knowledge, and the skills which will be required, and really needs help India to move up the innovation space, and really building up that kind of manufacturing capability. And definitely, as I say that vaccines and biologics are two sections which I see that they have been the long-lived temptations, which we have still undiscovered. So I think COVID definitely has thrown up these opportunities to us, and definitely India is seeing this as with a renewed focus, and dedicated incentives are being provided for manufacturing of vaccines and biologics in the country with the required ecosystem. But I think while we talk about pharma, I think largely the investor community which is looking at is probably the three things, right? The faster approvals, fast tracking of approvals, accelerated approvals, what we say, policy predictability, and export opportunities. And I think this is what Indian pharma is offering at this point of time. And this is where the window is open for investor to look at. Rajat, we'll move to the next slide, please. And I think this is one side I definitely wanted to focus on, and I think I did want to mention, I think especially when it comes to pharma and healthcare sector, and I think it goes for any sector for that matter, human capital and technology remains the heart of any ecosystem. And similarly is the case for this sector, where knowledge, technology, skills in India has been the forefront. And I think India has already seen that it has been on the forefront when it comes to AI based and innovations and development of drugs. And I think as we all see that human capital from India is going to be in the forefront, driving the new possibilities which we see in terms of the research and innovation and manufacturing in the sector. I'm moving to my last slide. Rajat. So I just wanted to take probably a minute before, while we talked about all these opportunities, we talked about the ecosystem. I think this slide just gives you a bird's eye view of the kind of ecosystem which is currently available in the country, which is providing all the clinical, academic, manufacturing, and research support system for the investors who are looking to invest in India. Next slide, please, Rajat. Last but not the least, I think as even Ambassador, and I think I will not take much time on this one. I think Ambassador has mentioned, I think the whole bilateral trade between India and Canada has been increasing over the years, has been very robust and vibrant. And as I see it, that it has only touched a small, tip of the iceberg. Definitely see a long, tremendous potential especially in the pharma sector. And the Invest India team is fully committed to really building this, taking this economic partnership to the next phase. So I will stop here, and thank you so much, Vipul and IMEC team, for this opportunity.
Thank you, Srividya. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay. First of all, my sincere apologies. Actually, my internet went down. I don't know why. It is for the first time actually that happened during a live conference, and it's been frantically, trying to connect here and there. So my apologies, but finally we are back. So Mr. Kion, thank you, Tejas, for holding the fort during those, excruciating 15-20 minutes. Anyway, Mr. Kion, are we okay? I mean, we still have one more Invest India presentation to do as per the agenda. Can we go there, or do you want to speak now and then I bring them back?
No, I'm ready to speak if that's works for you.
Okay, so we will have to change the order a little bit, if that's okay, Akriti?
That's all right.
Okay, sure. So Tejas, if you can pull up the introduction for Mr. Kion, we'll go to him first. Okay, so Mr. Jim Kion is the president of the Canadian Generic Pharmaceutical Association and president of Biosimilars Canada, organizations representing Canada's generic and biosimilar pharmaceutical sectors. Jim graduated with an MA in economics from Queen's University and he has more than 25 years of experience in the pharmaceutical sector. He has served as president of the CGPA since 1998 and was named the founding president of Biosimilars Canada in January 2015. Prior to joining CGPA in 1994, he held senior positions in the federal government and was directly involved in international trade negotiations for NAFTA and the WTO, as well as Canada's interprovincial trade negotiations. Jim is a past chair and a current member of the management committee of the International Generic and Biosimilars Medicines Association. The IGBA is committed to promoting the interest of generic and biosimilar medicines around the world. And you can find out more about both these organizations at their websites, canadiangenerics.ca and biosimilars.canada.ca. So over to you, Sir Jim Keon.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today, Vipul. I appreciate it very much. The theme is extremely interesting to me and to the Canadian Generic Pharmaceutical Association. The theme of opportunities in the healthcare and pharmaceutical sector in India and how Canada can participate in and benefit from this. I would say that already with the Canadian Generic Pharmaceutical Association, we have a very strong linkage to the Indian industry. Several of our member companies are actually Indian-owned companies. We have Oro Pharma, Marcan, which is owned by MCure. We have Natco, Taro, which Sun is the primary controlling interest. Many of our other companies like Apotex and Viatris has already been mentioned by Sarivati, have manufacturing sites and development sites in India. So these companies are very active in Canada. We appreciate this. It brings in new competition, new vigor into the Canadian market. We also work very closely with our colleagues the Indian Pharmaceutical Association, the Business Association for Pharmaceuticals, Generic Pharmaceuticals in India, and have a very good working relationship with Sudharshan Jain and his team there. So we are very aware and very linked with the Indian pharmaceutical industry. On the biologic and biosimilar side as well, many of our companies are moving actively into biosimilars. We have close to 50 products approved now in Canada, and many of those companies are involved in co-development arrangements with Indian R&D firms as well. So that is working very well. What we've seen in Canada over the past few years, and has been a decline, however, in the local manufacturing base in Canada. We've seen the number of different products made declining. We've seen the volume in Canada of domestically made product down around 10–12%. And so that is something that we would like to encourage. We would like to encourage Indian companies to not only market and operate on the commercial scale in Canada, but to think about Canada as an investment site. We do have, I mentioned Sun, primary shareholding interest in Taro, and they have a very effective commercial site in Brampton, making creams and ointments and many other related medications. So the other thing I would say is, right now the imports from India. India is the largest supplier of final dosage medicines into Canada. Over 60% of the active pharmaceutical ingredients are coming from India, secondarily from China. So we are very reliant on the Indian industry. We've noticed during the pandemic that the global supply chains have become increasingly complex, introducing risks, disruptions, increasing the risk of shortages. Costs have increased, transportation costs. I won't go through all of that. I think everyone is well aware of that. It certainly has been the case in the pharmaceutical industry as well. We are proud of our industry in Canada, the ability to micromanage their supply chains and continue to offer medicines throughout the pandemic. We really did not face significant shortages in Canada during the pandemic. Many of the ICE of the medications needed for patients in intensive care, et cetera, are generic medicines, and they were continued to flow. The overall, though, however, as I said, we would like to see the engagement with the Indian pharmaceutical sector increase and grow. We would like to see mutual advantages to it. I mentioned we would like to see more investment in Canada. That would be in product development, manufacturing, packaging, warehousing, distribution. We would encourage the Canadian government and others to look at this partnership as an opportunity to not only increase imports from India, but also investment by Indian companies in Canada. The other thing I think that's important, and we saw an announcement earlier this week of early resumption of trade talks, perhaps, between India and Canada. The Canadian International Trade Minister, Mary Ng, had a contact and a discussion with the Indian Minister of Commerce and Industry, Mr. Goyal, this week. That's something that we would support, encourage. We would like to see Canada have a special arrangement with India on trade, in particular in pharmaceuticals. And we think that the negotiation of a trade agreement that increases the security of the generic pharmaceutical supply chain between Canada and India should be a priority for us. That would include ongoing access to the APIs and finished dose products from India. So in terms of where we see this arrangement going, we see it growing. It's important. We would like to see Indian companies, as I mentioned, think about Canada not only as an opportunity as a market, but also as an opportunity for investment and exports from Canada. And we are going to be continuing to stress the need for a very secure and strong supply chain, global supply chain, with direct links India-Canada. I'll stop there and let others continue. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Kian, for those remarks. I'll be continuing for the next little while. Mr. Kian, just two quick questions. You've already touched on this. You talked about the vital role played by India in the generic space and the partnership that exists between Canada and India. And you also touched about the talks by the trade ministers. Are there any specific bottlenecks there that need to be addressed that are perhaps long-standing in this area that stop or somehow obstruct the relationship in the generic space from strengthening and deepening even further?
I think in general, we've seen concern over production in India during COVID. I mean, it was strong. There were some instances where we were concerned that because of COVID, there would be people missing work, shutdowns in plants, difficulties getting the product from the plant to the site of export, whether it's by marine transport or air transport. There were, in Canada, flights were not allowed from India for a certain period of time. There were, from the Indian side at one point for a very short period of time, there was some export controls on some key APIs and medications. So there are a number of challenges, yes. And I think that going forward, these are the kinds of things that I think the ministers could, productively negotiate more secure supply from India to Canada, and opening up opportunities, as I said, for foreign direct investment in Canada.
That's great. Thank you so much, Mr. Kian. And I guess there should have been something that should ask it earlier, but in terms of the biosimilars and generics, unfortunately, I'm not very aware. I'm not a pharmacist. Last time I took chemistry was high school, and once it stopped being mandatory, I stopped paying attention. But what is the sort of similar pathway, or what are your remarks in that regard in terms of biosimilars and partnerships between Canada and India in that field?
Well, I think so. Biosimilars are a newer market in Canada. They're the follow-on biologic products. Biologics now represent about 40% of spending, close to 40% of spending in Canada on all prescription medicines. The biosimilars are a growing business in Canada. It's close to $1 billion now. We have a wide variety of companies that are producing these products. Many of them, as I said, are marketing and developing and bringing to Canada for regulatory approval products that they are co-developing with Indian pharmaceutical companies. And so that is a tremendous opportunity for growth as well. And I see, we're working in Canada to expand the market, to make the opportunities more available. And I think it will be a natural growth for those companies that have the biosimilars. And they're one of the good things, I think, in this space is that many of the regulators are now allowing for global product approval, global development, and you don't have to repeat unnecessarily many of the clinical trials, whether in Canada or elsewhere. We can build on the work that's been done abroad. So yeah, this is I think in 5 years, the biologics and the biosimilars will be a very important component. It already represents probably close to 20% of our opportunities, and that's just growing all the time. So.
Okay, great. Thank you so very much for that, Mr. Keon. If I could get people to just turn on their cameras, I'll take a quick screenshot once more, since we are in the middle of our presentation. If you could just come back on, look into the camera, smile. I will count down to 3, and that's when I will take the screenshot. So counting down, 1, 2, 3. Okay, let me just see. Okay, everybody's looking into the cameras, eyes are open, so that's great. Thank you so very much for that. Mr. Keon, thank you for your presentation and your remarks. I really appreciate that. So we will now go back to our agenda. And so next on the agenda is Akriti, who is the Assistant VP on Healthcare. So let me just bring up the presentation. Vipul, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Sorry. So thank you again, Tejas. Once again, my apologies for the internet problems today. It continuously keeps dropping. So I have logged back again from my phone. So I believe the questions with Mr. Keon are done, right? Both of them? Okay, so before we move to Akriti, I would just like to ask quick 2 questions to Srividya as well. Hi, Srividya, you are still there, right?
Yes, very much, yeah.
Okay, so in the pharma sector, do you see more Indian companies buying a stake or expanding further in the overseas markets, or do you see more foreign companies and investors getting more active in India? Like, which way is there more action, from India to outside of India or from abroad to India?
So I think, Vipul, at this point of time, because of course, pharma industry, Indian pharma industry has also been our strength. So I think now we've also seen, Indian companies also growing global big way, especially in the pharma sector. So I think, to answer your question, yes, I see a mix of both at this point of time. And especially in the entire COVID pandemic, I think Indian pharma companies have also taken up the challenge to be able to really to build that kind of infrastructure and to be able to expand their capabilities and operations to meet the needs both domestically and globally. And I think with the required focus, both, from the government and the industry and the importance of it, I think as we see that Indian healthcare market is also getting attractive, as we go forward, and require for new drugs and medicines and manufacturing and R&D is going to be of much focus. I definitely see that we're going to see both of these trends, and I think Invest India is rightly placed as a facilitator to help companies in both ways.
Sure. And my second question to you is, before we move to Akriti, in terms of the cost, let me give you a personal example. My own medications for diabetes, blood pressure, cholesterol, whatever, it costs me about $260 a month here in Canada, while the same medications cost me $60 a month in India, 1/4 of the cost. So why is there such a huge price difference? And what are we doing to really promote and leverage that advantage globally?
So yes, I think Vipul, to answer, I think our present, the welcome, the opening remarks by the High Commissioner, and I think my presentation, I think we've really talked about the strength India has, the scale and the capital, and which we've been able to, manufacture pharmaceutical products, and the kind of accessibility we have been able to get to our citizens across the globe. And I think you're right, and I think, and medicines anyways is an integral part of the entire medical treatment. And as we see that the expenditure which is incurred on any of the drugs are quite substantial, and we play a very important big role especially when we talk about the out of the pocket expenses. Right. So, so when we talk from that perspective, I think India has been really able to leverage its strength. When you talked about the difference of $260 in Canada and $60 a month in thing, I think how I see it in India, I think there are the three strengths we have been able to leverage. One is the accessibility, the quality, and third is the affordability. And I think government has been able to come up with various initiatives through which I think we have been able to manage to bring medicines, at doorsteps, or, at the easiest way through generics. I would definitely like to name this initiative here, which is, this initiative was launched in somewhere in 2008, which is called the Jan Aushadhi Prayojana, or I should say, Affordable Medicines Program, which was brought in, and I think it has absolutely been a game changer, especially, setting up of these pharmaceutical stores which sell generic medicines at a cheaper price, quality drugs. I mean, these drugs are also WHO GMP compliant. So, and being able to get into that depth of level at this district, and, some of the far-flung areas where we're not able to get medications, but medications at, at affordable rates, and, and also quality medicines, which have been able to provide. And I think, as I said, we have the scale, we have the capabilities, and I think similarly, we have been able to provide the world also. But I think while we are talking about the entire affordability and, the quality standards of it, I think government is also continuously looking at new mechanisms through which these quality can be improved, and, putting not tighter regulations, but I think how we are incentivizing our manufacturers, especially the micro, small, medium enterprises, to really be able to upgrade their technology, or I should say upgradation of that kind of cluster, to be able to manufacture such quality products. And at the same time, affordability is something which currently there is a more strategic pricing mechanism which is being used currently in India, which is be called as a double-edged sword. But I think it has been able to achieve, both the interest of the industry as well as the consumer, both for the domestic and the global. Thank you. That's all.
Thank you for that, Srividya. So Tejas, let us move ahead, and you can pull up the slides for Akriti, and you can introduce her as well.
Okay, just a minute, please.
I think Tejas, I think we are running out of time. I can just maybe hop on to my if that works.
Sorry, I'll just read your first paragraph too.
All right.
I'll make it short. Appreciate it. Okay, great. Thank you so much. We're now, our next speaker is Akriti Bajaj, who is the Assistant VP and Lead Healthcare and Medical Devices at Invest India. So she, apart from providing medical support to medical device and healthcare players, Akriti also leads the investment portfolio of Japanese companies in India. In her previous roles, Akriti has worked with consulting clients in risk management and strategy development. She's passionate about healthcare and improving people's lives through technological solutions. Her field of expertise includes business analytics and strategy formulation. As a testimony to her expertise in consulting healthcare and medical device clients, she was named Medigate Top 50 Healthcare Leaders in 2021. She has a master's degree in biological sciences and bachelor's degree in instrumentation engineering from Birla Institute of Technology and Science, Pilani. Over to you, Akriti.
Thank you, Tejas, for the kind introduction. I'll quickly pull up my slides. You can just confirm when my slides are visible. Are my slides visible?
No. It says that
Not
you have
yet?
started screen sharing, but this slide is not shown.
Okay. I think today we are facing different innovative problems in Zoom. My laptop doesn't seem to be working, I think.
Yeah, my internet also actually, it's been really playing very funny.
It is after so
It's
many
still not back
after
up
2
actually.
years.
I don't know why.
Yeah, after 2 years, we are still facing new challenges. So yeah.
Okay. I can see your PowerPoint now. Yeah. Go ahead, Akriti.
Is it visible? Is it on full screen now?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Tejas and the IMEC team, and thank you, Vipulji, also. I think the best part of having the presentation in the middle is that you have such great speakers line up in the beginning that they sort of cover your entire subject, and you just have to come in and maybe reinforce some ideas about the market. So I'll just quickly do that because High Commissioner Sir and my colleague Shri and like the other speakers also, they have sort of covered the entire space of healthcare and pharmaceuticals in India very well, actually. So I'll just quickly move on to some interesting points that I've added to my slide. In fact, chop and change right now only. So I think this the most important component on this slide for me is the definition that WHO has given for healthcare. It basically does not mean that it does not mean absence of diseases. It's a different. It's more of an umbrella of maybe complete mental and physical healthcare, which is very important these days, especially the mental toll that COVID-19 brought upon each one of us. So these are some numbers that High Commissioner Sir has already highlighted, but I'll just quickly go through these points as well, just to show the expanse of the market, especially after COVID-19, where the healthcare market can actually go. So as you can see, it was around 280 billion in FY20. FY 2022 by 2022, by the end of this year, will be around 372, which is a huge number, and the jump. And I feel that this number was actually quoted before the COVID-19 pandemic, but after the pandemic, and not, I don't know if I should say after the pandemic, whether it's jinxed, but yeah, okay, I'll still go on and say that these are the numbers that are not calculated, keeping in mind the recent splurge of new healthcare technologies and medical devices that have come up now. So these are some statistics I've just used. So the first one basically talks about the fact that $1 spent on the sector, on the healthcare sector, actually leads to a 0.77 or a $0.8 contribution, whether it be in manufacturing or pharmaceuticals, whether it be a doctor providing services. So this shows the kind of potential the sector has, because if you invest like 100, you'll get 77 back. So this is the kind of ROI that this sector actually shows in potential, in terms of potential. And if you see, my colleague, she covered a lot on the manpower and the skilled resources in her presentation on the macro points. But this sector per se, the healthcare sector, is known to be the largest employer in India. And it was expected to create around 7.5 million jobs by 2022. So basically this year, and we'll see the jobs that are created. I've also added the FDI statistics, which High Commissioner Sir covered already, but this 7.8 billion is basically the hospitals and diagnostic segments. It's since 2000, and the tenure is around, you can say, around 21 years in completion. And the overall healthcare sector, of course, has more aspects to it, but 7.8 billion is the one that came in hospital infra and diagnostic centers. So I just want to quickly cover the growth drivers. As in my previous slide, we covered mostly on where the sector has potential to grow to. But this slide mostly covers how and why the sector has potential to go through that level. So the first, as you can see, is the growing population, like 1.5, 1.3 right now, but 1.45 by 2028. That's going to be a huge number, and that's going to be a huge population to cater to, especially if you see the fourth point, which talks about the life expectancy increasing and expected to cross 70 years by 2022 now only. So you'll need, so these many people will be there in India, and the healthcare services will need to be increased in India to cater to this population. And of course, the most important part, and especially I think COVID also taught us this, that we need, people have become more aware towards their health, not only health, I would say, but of course to the wellness as well, which is why they are spending more. They have allocated more funds. They have allocated more components of their salaries and earnings to better wellness and better healthcare for their entire families, including taking life insurance policies, or maybe even taking some traditional medicines which lead to longevity and also better health. And of course, as everyone is aware, India is actually growing in the NCDs, which is the non-communicable diseases. So we learned a lesson from COVID-19, wherein we saw a virus causing such havoc in the system. So now we are trying to make sure that the NCDs that exist in India, we are able to cater to them: better diabetes care, better kidney care, better dialysis care, and all the other NCDs that are leading to death and leading to low mortality rate. So the next slide, I have just covered the sub-segments in the healthcare. Of course, healthcare is a very big umbrella which contains a lot of sub-segments, but for now, these are the segments that are of most importance and hold the most promising promising subsectors in terms of investments. So the first one is, of course, hospitals, that is hospital infrastructure, that is the major part of healthcare, which is there, which covers the services. Then comes the telemedicine part, which is part of the digital health, as well. And in my upcoming slides, I'll also quickly give you a brief number of the evolution of the telemedicine market in India, and we see how it can grow more, and especially if we are able to provide services to other patients as well, including not only in India, but exporting our services as well. And the third is medical devices, which of course we are the fourth largest market in Asia. So, and we are poised to grow to become the fifth largest market in the world by 2030. So that's the sort of growth that you will see in only a couple of years when it comes to the healthcare sector. And the fourth point, I think this is the most interesting point, and this is one of the areas wherein the government is putting in a lot of focus and a lot of efforts in growing this sector. This sector till now has been more of an informal sector, which sort of grew as an offshoot of our excellent services, our doctors, our nurses that we provide to foreign patients. And it started off being called as medical tourism for everyone, but now we have shifted to a more formal, and we have coined a term for it, which is called the medical value travel, which essentially means the kind of value that a patient gets in when they are coming to India, or maybe traveling to other countries for their medical services. So this is also a very interesting field, because it will also lead to a lot of foreign exchange for India. It leads to a lot of investments coming into this particular sector. There are so many ideas, there are so many startups that are coming up in supporting and taking medical travel from the 10th position we are at currently to maybe, I don't know, the second, third position across the world. The fifth one is a digital health one, This is a very big field, of course, because it includes a lot of health IT, health infrastructure. This is important because this highlights our strengths, the strengths that we have in India, which is software services, and how we can sort of provide software services, not only in terms of IT or maybe creating software for other countries, but also having its support in healthcare and of course other medical devices, medical technologies, and of course R&D services as well. The sixth one, of course, is the health insurance one. And as everyone is aware, India actually created the largest healthcare insurance scheme by the government of India, which is called the Ayushman Bharat. I have a quick snippet of it on the next slide as well. So I will just quickly move on to the next slide. So, like I said, for healthcare to grow by that level, we have demographic factors. We have a lot of subsectors that will see growth across the world. And of course, the impact will be seen in India as well. But the sector also needs support from the government, which is given in a lot of ways by the government by launching new schemes, whether new policies to promote healthcare so that everyone in India has affordable and accessible healthcare. So these are only some of the points that I thought would be relevant for today's discussion, but this does not even cover, like I would say, it does not even cover 5% of the initiative the government has launched throughout, and especially during the COVID pandemic. I would say they have come up with so many new schemes, even during the COVID pandemic. So the first one is the FDI policy, in which there is a 100% automatic route. You can construct a hospital. That's an automatic route. That's a greenfield investment. Medical devices, you can set up a medical device unit. It is all greenfield investment, and there is 100% automatic route. You don't have to go through any approval. And the second one is the Ayushman Bharat scheme I was talking about. This basically, it's the world's largest healthcare scheme, insurance scheme, and it is for 50 crore beneficiaries, and it is totally digitized. You don't need to, it's absolutely paperless, and it's very efficient. And a lot of people are actually utilizing the scheme as well. And the third one, if you see on the left-hand side, is the telemedicine guidelines. This is very interesting because as we saw in 2020, in the beginning of March 2020, we saw that that we started seeing the impact of the COVID-19. The pandemic had hit, but the government thought that it would be a good time to actually come up with these guidelines, because this was the need of the hour at that time, including the e-pharmacy, which was already active, but the guidelines of the telemedicine weren't released till then. But I think it was a very timely movement, and it was very prompt on the government's part to come up with these guidelines so that all the healthcare service providers can provide services even to patients from the comfort of their home. And of course, the production incentive, which my colleague also covered, it's majorly directed towards manufacturing of medical devices and pharmaceuticals, and of course the IVDs, which is the in vitro diagnostic medical devices. So like I said, this is just the scratch on the surface. And like I mentioned, I just wanted to cover one point which shows the growth of the telemedicine during COVID-19 specifically. So if you can see the number, you will see in 2019. So I think I must have the 2019 is not visible right now on the screen, but the 11% basically shows the 11% basically shows the usage of telemedicine and the sort of interest that telemedicine saw from people. And now you see that is the interest is now at a 76%, and you've seen this growth. This growth has just happened in the COVID-19 period, just in 2 years, and you can see the number of consultations that happen over just a telephone, and a lot of lives saved, and a lot of medicines and right prescriptions were provided, because as everyone is aware, I think there is also a statistics, I'm forgetting the number, but I think it was around 65% of the diseases are actually caused by wrong medication or extra medication, which is a huge number. And I think to cater to that problem, I think telemedicine is the solution, wherein you can just pick up the phone and you can just call the doctor and you can ask him about the right prescription for you. And just an interesting fact in terms of the investment that can come to this sector is that telemedicine has potential to replace 50% of the in-person consultations, basically, and this will show that this sector or this subsector, people can come and invest in this, and it will keep on growing, and it will not only grow by 50%. I think this will definitely go down to around maybe this will go down to, I would say, 60. This will go down to 40% in person, and people will start reaching out to doctors through telemedicine more often now than so right now. So this is a quick number on the subsectors that I shared with you. I will definitely be sharing this slide with the organizers as well. I think this can be used as a reference for the numbers and stats and the growth that the sector can see over this time period. The fourth, I just want to focus maybe when it comes to investments, I want to focus a bit on you can see the fourth pillar, because this is not something I focused on in my previous slide. This is basically the medical device market. The sector is growing exponentially. It will be 50 billion by 2025. And of course, the sector, it's like such a huge sector in terms of innovation. If a country reaches a level in this sector, they are also becoming very strong in terms of innovation, because this is what eventually saves life for people, as was seen in the COVID-19 pandemic as well, especially when the ventilators and everything were a dire need of the world for everyone. So I think this sector definitely has potential to grow in India as well. It is currently at a nascent stage, but I think COVID-19 will certainly act as a catalyst, and maybe you can say it can be a silver lining somewhere for this sector as well. And the government support in this sector has been huge, and especially in setting up dedicated medical device parks with ready-made infrastructure in 4 particular states. They have recently awarded these projects investments to 4 states, wherein investors can just go in and they can just see the facilities that they have. They can use the existing biomedical waste facilities. They can use a lot of these semiconductors. They can use a lot of the supply chain ecosystem that will exist in these parks. So this is a great opportunities for investors to come in and see the investment, see the park, and like set up their facilities. So I think coming to the last slide, this is certainly my last slide. I won't go overboard on this. So this mostly talks about our services at Invest India. We provide end-to-end facilitation support, be it for any investor, be it at any point of time in their investment journey, be it whether they're thinking whether I should, like what sector should I invest in, like, and what subsector should I go in? Is there a subsector which has more growth, but is the market full of local manufacturers? Should I even go into it? We provide that detailing of an advisory to investors when they're looking for investments. So, and then if an investor is sure, like they want to invest only in a particular sector or a particular subsector, they just want to maybe make stents, they just want to focus on stents in India, they want to export it, we help them understand which state will be providing them the best services. Like for example, for stents, they don't require a lot of, like stents might not be very focused on the technology side. It can also create a lot of employment for women employment. And there are states in India which focus more on women employment. They give a lot of incentives, like Jharkhand state, they give a lot of incentives when it comes to women employment. So we can even provide you business advisory on where to set up that plant. So that is the sort of detailing that we do when an investor reaches out to us and comes to us with their investment plans. So I think, and the rest is sort of covered, the entire umbrella of services is covered here. And but I think the last column, if you see, that's the best part, I think, that we provide the aftercare services. We don't leave you in the middle of the project. We help you through and through. We help you with any issue regulations that you're facing, whether it be like as simple as saying that there is no road outside my office or something like that. I'm just using some case in point for some investors that this is the real issue that they have faced. So like if the issue like that, or maybe if there is any expansion support we want to give to them, like they're expanding to, they're looking at shifting their supply chains from countries. They want to come to India, they want to look at some other countries for their supply chain. We also help them in expansion support on that front. So this is the end-to-end cycle that we help them on, the pre-investment to the long-term partnership, which is clearly the most important when it comes to an investor. I think we have a dedicated team for healthcare sector at Invest India. We provide a dedicated relationship manager for each client. So you will be, and that person will be connected with you on WhatsApp or on email or anything, and you can reach out to them for any queries or anything, any challenges that you face. And I think with that, thank you so much. And thank you so much for the organizers for giving me the time to speak about the sector I truly love. And thank you so much. I'll just stop my screen share.
Sure. Thank you, Akruti, for that presentation. And I'll just ask you one quick question before we see the 1-minute video on medical tourism, and then we'll go to our next speaker, Dr. Pradeep Merchant. So the question for you is, in the healthcare sector in India, what are the specific areas that you are most optimistic about? And in terms of the FDI or foreign investments coming to India in these sectors, where do you see Canada in that?
Yes, thank you for the question, Vipul. And I think that question is so biased. I mean, you're talking about a sector that has the potential to grow and grow. I think I don't think it'll be fair for me to point out towards any particular subsector, but I can definitely talk about a sector which is nascent but can grow, and a sector wherein we need to also increase our services. So I think I will start with the subsector. I feel hospital infrastructure, especially in the lower tier cities, is very important. And the government has special schemes that they came up with to set up these hospitals, like 100-bedded hospitals in these cities. I think that's a very good investment area, considering that you will be also providing. A lot of these tier 2, tier 3 cities will be getting a lot of these healthcare services. And I think, and when it comes to healthcare infra, I also want to associate it with the medical value travel, because I believe that with the expansion of the healthcare infra, you'll also sort of be providing, you can also create like medi-cities. You can create an area where there's a hospital, maybe there's like a hotel, and there are these small houses, and there are diagnostic centers within that same area. So that those are the kind of, and especially considering the doctors and the surgery care that we have in India, it's like, if you see there is some research places have done some analysis showing the cost of surgery in some other country and in India. I think there's a stark difference between that. So I think that medical value travel as a subsector, I think it has the potential to become a very huge sector and not just be called a sector. And of course, I think I will maybe name the digital health side of things, which is a lot of PE investments and everything flew into that sector as well, not only during COVID. I personally feel digital health or digi health is the next fintech, like as in, I think fintech will be left behind. I mean, no offense meant to anyone in the fintech industry, but I just feel honestly that digital health will overpower that. And and a lot of investments will come in, a lot of startups will start coming in that sector, and it'll be like, I feel healthcare will be like it's already like an amoeba, but I think with more legs and arms spread across spread across everywhere, with attracting a lot of investments.
Thank you for that, Akruti. So thank you for joining us and for your presentation as well.
Thank you so much.
Our pleasure, actually. So Tejas, can you now play the 1-minute long video for medical tourism, and then you can introduce Dr. Pradeep Merchant. Thank you.
Are you able to hear the
audio.
video? Okay, just a second, please.
There's no audio. Huh?
Yeah, I'm working on that. Just a second. Are you able to hear it?
No. Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's okay now.
Okay. So now we'll go back to our next presenter. Just a second. Our next speaker is Dr. Pradeep Merchant, Site Chief, Division of Neonatology at Ottawa Hospital. He has also received the Order of Canada recently. Dr. Merchant is a medical doctor and he's a medical director of the Rich Little Special Care Nursery for 25 years. He's a strong leader in the development of regional and provincial health strategies, and he has been a member of the Queensway Carleton Hospital Foundation. Wishing to make a global impact, Dr. Merchant joined forces with a Canadian charity, brought together Indo-Canadian volunteers, and hosted 3 successful fundraising galas to raise over $500,000 in aid for Kalthana village in Rajasthan, India. He was a chair and president of the Indo-Canadian Ottawa Business Chamber and was recently appointed to the Order of Canada. He, along with others, founded the Canada-India Centre for Excellence in Science, Technology, Trade, and Policy at Carleton University in Ottawa. Dr. Merchant has volunteered in preparing food for the homeless and worked with other not-for-profit organizations that raise funds for cancer. He has worked with the Government of Canada to create an international student visa program and also created a Canada-India acceleration program for women entrepreneurs from both countries. Dr. Merchant, welcome, and over to you.
Thank you, Tejas. Can you guys can hear me, right?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. I think I'm going to give a bit of a break from the pharmaceutical-driven conversation. As a practicing clinician and as an academician, I'm going to be actually reflecting more onto what we have learned through our COVID experience and how that will transform our healthcare industry, including pharmaceuticals, going forward. What we have learned and what we can do. If you would have asked me this 2 years ago, how the healthcare is going to actually progress into it, my conversation or my dialogues would have been different. And since now we are going through the 2 years of this pandemic, clearly our reflections are not simply the pharmaceuticals, but also in how we can deal with the next pandemic, which may not be that far out. So I think what I'm going to provide is a little bit of a break from a pharmaceutical market and a conversation, then going back into our own 2 years of experience of saying, what have we seen, what have we learned, and what can we do better when it comes to Canada and India in terms of healthcare. So Tejas, if you can actually share my slides.
Yeah, just a second, please. Yeah, go ahead.
Next, please. So COVID pandemic, as we all know, has affected many levels, human lives and suffering across global. The psychological and the mental health has affected not just adults and elderlies, but of course from the children, and how are we going to come out of it in terms of how we are going to recreate this normalcy, which the children have not seen in the last 2 years. There's obviously increased morbidity and mortality to the elderly populations, but also the people with chronic illnesses. Vipul just talked about the diabetes and hypertension and hypercholesteremia. How are we going to deal with it post-pandemic, or how COVID has affected us in looking into some of those chronic illnesses? And clearly what we did not anticipate, some of those pandemic, how global economical slowdown could have occurred. Second, next. I think the experience of last 2 years cannot just translate into the actionable item. I think we need to actually think about how we can completely improve the whole spectrum of population health and healthcare delivery. And of course, the infrastructure globally. And I'm so glad to sort of hear from His Excellency Ajay Bisaria ji, of course, Vipul's opening comment, as well as what Shri and as well as what Akriti has actually said, that we need to really work globally. And India is clearly a global leader, and clearly an attractive point where we need to actually start working with it, and Canada can actually create a far more linkage and synergy in terms of healthcare deliverables. Next. But it seems that we have learned from what our previous experience, but when it comes to coronavirus, we never actually learned a lot. I think Manoj, some of you actually probably remember that this was not the first coronavirus pandemic or coronavirus infection we've actually experienced in the last 2 decades. Next. If you all remember, in 2003, there was SARS, which was exactly the same virus. It was the coronavirus which actually created the infection of a severe acute respiratory syndrome, but it fizzled out. Globally, people never actually paid attention to it beyond that actual incidence in 2003 to 2005. And then subsequently, again, a few years later, we actually had MERS, Middle East Respiratory Syndrome. That actually lasted for about a couple of years as well. And 10 years after that, when now a coronavirus disease 19 or a SARS-CoV-2 was experienced. So what we had actually learned from 2003, we never translated into saying, this is one virus which we have to be carefully looking at it and have to develop lots of strategy if it actually again get exposed to the human population. And that's exactly what had happened in 2019. Next. So it is clear that infectious disease should be considered amongst the most important health hazard. And India or Canada or any other country is not immune to that, as it's been seen by this pandemic. And as our global countries have become a global village, the spread from one country to the other country actually can happen in days. As you can imagine, from Omicron, it actually started in somewhere in December, and by January, it was all across the world in spreading all across the world. So keeping in mind that infectious disease and how it is actually spreading across the world is going to be a huge transformative changes in terms of how we create our infrastructure going forward. Next. So what are the reality check? One of the things which we really never invested a lot of money, particularly across the world, a lot of monies were invested in some of the developing nations, but not across the global, is the public health surveillance program. It's never attractive. It's really don't feel very romantic about it because we can't talk about the drugs and the diseases, but public health surveillance program is the one which is so important in really dealing with something of this nature which we saw. And then the next one is, and I think Akriti spoke about it, availability of sufficient infrastructure for not just the hospital, but for isolation and for intensive care treatment. It also, in our countries, in Canada or US and even the developed nations, an ability to absorb and manage sudden and persistent pressure, which comes out of acute healthcare delivery, human resources, what we need to actually help them, as well as the workload. And we saw in 2 years, all of those actually began to crack and fall apart. And that's how the lockdown was created, as well as our inability to deal with a sudden an intense surge on healthcare deliveries. And as a practicing physicians, I know what we actually dealt with in the last 2.5 years. Next. So from policy perspective, the reality that the potential delay in a major decision like a lockdown, if it's not done appropriately and in a timely manner, it can impact a major downstream outcomes. And finally, speed at which the global public health crisis can be translated into financial downturn, nobody actually had anticipated or had modeled into it so that we could actually prepare if something like this were to be happens. Next. Next. So I do believe the COVID-19 experience now is going to act as a transformative catalyst for the world, and India will play a great deal of important role in terms of how we can lead, not just through the pharma industry, but through various other industries as well. And I think Srividya and Kriti has actually very well laid it out. Next. So what are the new models of healthcare deliveries would be? Well, we will have to pay more attention to the preventative measures. But what Akriti was actually pointing out to us is the remote and telemedicine care is exponentially going to grow. And that's what I think people need to focus and invest into it. I think her numbers are correct and exactly the same numbers we saw in Canada as well, that we had close to about 20% utilization pre-pandemic. Currently now we are using more than 80% of our health delivery care is on telemedicine, either phone or either on Zoom or on the team, but we are actually doing far more telemedicine care. And if people know about our Canada, of course, with inclement weather, which is what is happening today, it's snowing all over in Ottawa. It's very difficult for people to actually reach from one destination to other destination. So telemedicine has been actually taken up by even the people in our country with the vigor, and they are really liking it. Sustained technological innovation, I think that's what even Akriti spoke about in Invest India. There's so much to actually gain out of that one. Transformative pharma industry, which includes the vaccine development. We have invested, or Canadian government has actually spoken about major investment into our own vaccine development, our production, our distribution worldwide, and then, of course, new viral agents like in COVID-19, the Paxlovid and other medications which are coming down the pipeline. And again, one of the most important thing I think Akriti, their presentation did not actually mention is development of lab medicine. One of the biggest thing, if you recall, in the first phase of our COVID-19 was our inability to test adequate amount of people, inability for a lab to actually rise to the kind of number, because we have really never put so much emphasis on our lab medicine. So it's very important. One of the factors which I think Invest India should really be thinking about that as well. How can we enhance our lab medicine as well, so that everybody has an access to it in a timely manner? Next. Telemedicine, I think I just want to expand that a little further. Its utilization, and I agree with Akriti, it's going to be exponential going forward. The routine monitoring of a patient at home for various clinical encounter is now quite possible. As we all know, and I think we've seen it as well, you can actually do your electrocardiogram by just putting a 2-finger on your mobile devices, and that actually can transport itself into your cardiologist, and cardiology can actually see it. Okay, do you have your heart? So if you have a chest pain and you're not 100% sure where you're going and you can't actually get to emerge, you have a possibility of actually getting your ECG. The cardiology or the emerge physician actually can see it and can guide you exactly where you need to actually do it. So it is very possible. In my field of, let's say, obs, gynae, and newborn care, where I deal with a high-risk pregnancy, there is a possibility that I can remotely monitor the fetal heart and a fetal well-being by just putting some of the monitors right on the mom's belly. And then I can be connected through the apps with my own office, and I can monitor the baby's heart rate from distance. So if the mom actually has any issues, I can answer them that the baby is fine, or baby is not fine, head to the hospital right away. Do not waste even single minute for the baby's health. So there is clearly a development of the technological superiority has to come in. And some of the startup which Invest India talked about, I think we have a potential to enhance that in amazing direction in next 5 to 10 years. Next. So what are the other new technology we can talk about? Like drones. I think we need to think about in India as well. How can we actually get some of this critical medicine to remote areas in India? Well, drone technology has begun to actually work now. If you can deliver pizza, you can actually deliver medicine as well. So there is a possibility of looking into it. But one more, the next one is the robotics. You got to think about what did South Korea and Taiwan actually do? We were missed out in this one. If we would have had the robotics checking everybody's temperature when they arrived at the airport in March of 2020 in Canada or US, if they were looking into their eyes, if they were looking the throat, and they're clearing them that, okay, you are allowed to actually go in, we would not have needed the kind of personnel we needed, and not a lot of people would not have actually walked in. If you know from some of the videos which has come out of South Korea, you will see that school, when the kids were actually going into the school, their temperature was actually checked by the robotics or robots, and they were actually clear to actually go into school because they had no temperature, the throat was clear and their eyes were clear. So there is so much to learn from it, as well as in terms of what the COVID-19 actually has taught us and what the next frontier is going to be. The 3D printing. There's no question it's a revolution in terms of how we are going to manufacture some of the medical as well as the non-medical products by various remote communities, and we can actually create 3D printing labs so that we don't necessarily have to create a huge infrastructure in actually creating medical devices. And that's another places where we need to actually work on. And one of the most important thing, and I'm excited about, is handheld mobile devices. And I think India can actually lead along with Canadian sort of superiority in terms of helping out each other. We can actually lead a revolution in how healthcare can be provided for our future generation. Next. So there has to be an improved emphasis on a system or a surveillance system. The only way we can actually go forward with is that how do we actually deploy and how do we monitor? And again, COVID actually showed that we have a Can Arrive app, while India had their own app where we could actually monitor them, where the people and trace the individual who may have come into infection, like what the South Korea and Taiwan had done. They had actually, literally speaking, had less amount of testing, more amount of tracing, and that actually prevented the entire country from getting into a full-blown pandemic. So it's an important thing, again, for the healthcare reform and transformation to think about it. Next. And one of the important issues, as well as we are actually talking about it, and I know we'll go back into the pharma conversation with my friend Atul, who is lining up after me, but I think it's very important to understand the public health literacy. And everybody knows how the public health literacy has actually played out in the last 2 years. The second point I'm making is one of the defining aspects of the current pandemic was the unprecedented level of misinformation and conspiracy theories and a promotion of unproven therapeutics. I think it's very important for the healthcare reform to understand that healthcare literacy to our general population is very essential if you really want to transform your healthcare deliverables. Next. What are the one which we are looking at between the Canada and India? Because it's not just about the pharma, it's also about the medical personnel, the nursing personnel, the supported personnel as well, like a physiotherapy, respiratory. How can we do the joint project between the Canada and India? Well, there are many then challenges. One is credential, your licensing. How are they going to reimburse? Is it technology and its evolution between the two countries? How are we actually going to protect our data? Security of those privacy of a personal information, safety of the global recommendation where it can apply to all the population across the world. Next. Mechanism to deal with any litigation, because there's going to be a litigation when you actually deal with this kind of global conversation. Full data anonymization so that nothing is identified, as well as use of advanced data system like a big data, and triangulation to create ethical transparency. That's how we can transform our healthcare deliveries in next generation. Next. Next, please. Again, next, please. So what is the impact of COVID-19 on the Indian healthcare sector? Well, with COVID-19 testing even more developed like ours in Canada or US or Europe, India's healthcare system was naturally shaken in an initial phase. But I have to totally agree with what Akriti and what His Excellency has actually mentioned. Private and government sector worked in tandem in dealing with the current crisis and has come out of it, improved understanding of what's needed to help. going forward. India's private healthcare sector has contributed significantly and account for 60% of the inpatient care during the pandemic, and that will continue to remain supported by so many incentives which government of India has instituted. Next. Indian healthcare sector, along with the central and state government, undertook a robust response to tackle this pandemic. They set up the dedicated COVID-19 hospital, the isolation center, tech-enabled mapping of resources, and then of course Arogya Setu mobile app, which I think His Excellency actually spoke about. Next. The mobile app actually helped in mapping, in contact tracing. Self-assessment was used extensively as well. And that is going to be a next generational revolution in terms of technology platform to actually understand our response, our management, including delivery of essential items and containment zones, consultation with patients, bed management, as well as real-time monitoring. And I think all of them is going to lead to the better transformation of healthcare deliverables in India. And Canada can participate in how to set all those things up within India as well. Next. Investment, and I think both Akriti and Shri has actually said that far better than what I'm actually laying it out, but it is an amazing, amazing opportunity for Canadian enterprising individuals to actually participate in it. I have to credit High Commissioner Bisayaji. He had introduced me to university president, and I have a major conversation happening in first week of March, where how the healthcare industry from India, as well as healthcare leaders from Canada, can actually come together in looking for the next generational deliverables. Next. So what are the investment opportunity? In my mind, medical infrastructure, and I think Akriti mentioned the tier 2 and tier 3 cities, they are looking for the hospital development. Just after I finish this conversation, I have to actually deal with and join another meeting where we are actually developing a brand new hospital here right in Ottawa. Health insurance awareness. I know, as you know, our Canadian population is fully universal health insurance covered. And so that the concept needs to actually get into Indian psyche as well. Of course, government policy, and I have to give government of India a lot of credit. They've been actually very, very forward thinking. They've created universal health cover or health for all scheme. They've created Ayushman Bharat, which we talked about, as well as National Digital Health Mission as well, which is amazing in terms of going forward for India. Medical tourism, I see there is a new terminology. So I think that will actually continue to grow as well. And then use of technology like eSanjeevani app will actually help out the general population of India as well. Next. Finally, at the end, as I said in the very beginning, current global pandemic experience lay the foundation for a significant post-pandemic healthcare transformation, so that system can be better prepared to address the next global health, and taking every advices which we can actually get from everybody. But keeping in mind, if we saw this third episode of COVID virus infections globally, it could anything can actually happen just around the corner, given our close proximity and the world has become closer. Keeping in mind, Zika virus was actually happening in just down south in Mexico and Brazil. Ebola virus is happening in Africa. There is always something lurching around the corner, and we need to transform our healthcare deliverable. We need to transform our pharmaceutical industry. We need to come together as a public and public health partnership with politicians and try and actually make better tomorrow with the healthcare. Thank you again, Tejas, for giving me this opportunity. Thank you, Vipul, again for inviting me to talk a little global aspect of what is happening in post-pandemic.
Absolutely. Thank you for the fantastic presentation, Pratibhai. So once again, my internet issues, apologies for that again. It is still not back up. So I am still thankful to my smartphone for saving the day, and for Tejas for keeping the flow going. So we still have 3 more speakers to go. So I think we probably go about 20 minutes or so over time. But that's all right. I mean, there's a lot of useful information. So I've got 2 quick questions for you, if you can give brief answers. And then we'll move to our next speaker, Mr. Atul Agarwal. So the first question to you, it's a pretty long one. You have been very, very active on the Canada-India corridor, working with both business and political leaders for a very long time. Also actively involved in the healthcare and hospital system. While India managed to drastically improve its capacities during the deadly second wave, Canadians are largely disappointed in the inadequate capacities and failures in building new hospitals or capacities either at hospitals or at the LTC homes over the last 2 years, despite spending hundreds of billions of dollars, both provincially and federally. If you have to compare the overall healthcare scenario in both countries, how can both countries work together to learn and benefit from each other's knowledge and experience, something that you just mentioned that you are now going to work upon?
So I think our focus is too much on to tier 1 and the tier 2 facilities. We want to actually build very high-tech hospitals, and we want to spend billions of dollars actually building it, and which is necessary. But I think what we have in Canada, US, as well as in Europe, what we have missed out is actually bringing the community-based deliverables, so that we need to actually invest more toward the urgent centers in some of the smaller communities. So that lots of these things can be actually handled, not necessarily at the hospital level, but at the clinic level or the other community clinic level, where most of the people can actually go and receive their screening, or so that it does not overburden the hospital emergency system. There's also a recognition that our population to the intensive care bed capacity was never actually planned based on what can actually happen if there is an intense pressure to actually get built up. And there is no capacity ever was looked into that can we actually create more beds instead of actually looking into how can we start to deal with it. And that was something which was lacking in our planning process. So as I just said, I'll be dropping off this one. And as soon as I join with my civic hospital redevelopment program, we'll be talking about that. That's exactly where we are trying to create a capacity now across the country, across North America, across globally, I suppose, where we should be able to deal with acute emergencies, whichever way it actually comes in, but not necessarily neglecting the chronic illnesses which you talked about, because those are still ongoing and happening. The cancer, the strokes, the heart attacks, as well as diabetes, hypertensions, and all other things, which is still happening and the population is suffering. So we need to actually balance those two things now going forward.
Sure. And the second question for you is, as someone on the front line during the pandemic, we have read about this thing, we have heard about it on radio. What do you think is the level of the burnout and fatigue in the healthcare professionals everywhere? And while you take care of people, how could we, the people, take care of you, the healthcare professional?
I think there's no question there is a mental health, and the fatigue of the frontline healthcare worker is palpable. As a leader, as me being a chief and leader, I'm very mindful of all the people who work under my umbrella, making sure that I'm supporting them. I think part of the problem is that we need to support the leaders as well. So everyone is well aware in terms of getting the mental health check. And I think we've done so much more in last 2 years than I've done it in last 30 years. In terms of making sure that everybody's mental health. So we need to continue facing it. The medical professionals, not only just doctors, but the nursing staff and respiratory therapists and pharmacists, all of them have done a remarkable job in fighting this pandemic. And we need to continue to keep reminding ourselves that we all are human and we do get tired. So thank you again, Vipul, for addressing that. I'm doing quite well, and I think we will continue to actually support our population across the country and globally. So thanks again for asking.
Thank you, Pradeep Bhai, for your presentation, for joining us today. Okay, so Tejas, if you can introduce our next speaker. Tejas?
Yeah. Okay, so our next speaker is Atul Agarwal, who is the CEO of Markan Pharmaceuticals. Atul Agarwal, the Markan Pharmaceuticals is a generic pharmaceutical manufacturer and importer based in Ottawa, Canada. He has been actively working in the healthcare industry for over 30 years. Atul co-founded A&A Pharmachem in 1992 and continues as its chairman. A&A Pharmachem is a leading Canadian supplier of healthcare ingredients used to manufacture both pharmaceutical and nutraceutical products. A&A were pioneers in sourcing active pharmaceutical ingredients from India and supplying the Canadian pharmaceutical industry since 1993. In 2005, Atul founded Markan Pharmaceuticals Inc., which manufactures generic drugs and is supplying medicines to pharmacies and hospitals across Canada. Markan was Canada's first generic drug company, sourcing almost exclusively generic drugs from India. Atul sold Markan to Emcure Pharmaceutical Limited, based in Pune, India in 2015. He is currently vice chair of the Queensway Carleton Hospital, and along with his wife, run a private charitable foundation that helps girls access education in the Thar Desert area of Rajasthan. Atulji, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tejas. And I want to thank Vipul for the opportunity to speak today and to acknowledge my co-panelists, in particular, my good friends, His Excellency Ajay Basaria, the High Commission, Dr. Pradeep Merchant, who introduced me to Vipul, and to Jim Keon, who runs our association. I'm a member of CGPA, and to Akshay Lal, who's also been a long friend of mine. I respect very much in the industry. Perhaps you put up my presentation, Tejas. Go to the next page, please. So I'm not going to read out all the slides. I'm just going to focus on a few key points. As everybody's mentioned, India is the world's largest manufacturer of generic drugs. And we are part of the Emcure Group, which is the 9th largest pharmaceutical company by sales in India, with over 10,000 employees worldwide. And Emcure is selling in over 70 countries around the world. Next slide. So we were really the first Canadian-based distributor to market pharmaceutical ingredients using a broad-based strategy, sourcing products from India. And there's a list of some of the companies that we represented in the Canadian market. And then we were the first Canadian-based company to exclusively conduct R&D and supply of generic drugs from India. We work with a number of companies, contract manufacturers, CROs in India, and some of our partners are listed there. So we source over 90% of our generic drugs from India, conducting both R&D and clinical studies in India. And based on export data, we believe we are the largest importer of pharmaceutical finished dosage products from India, both under the Markan label, but we do a lot of private label work under different labels in the market and import over 100 drugs from India. Next page, please. India is the largest supplier of APIs to the Canadian market. Over 50% of all APIs are from India, and finished dosages, over a third, are from India. I think what it makes India very special, in my opinion, is its large talent pool, its superb technical capabilities of very capable people, and a pipeline of excellent chemical engineers, pharmacologists it's very unique. And I think the second key thing is this: India is a highly competitive market, and it drives lower costs. It makes India a very competitive market to source products from. Next slide, please. I think we missed the India Advantage slide, please. Not there?
1 second, please.
Oh, I think we did. Sorry, I think I did that already. I apologize. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right. So some of the risks that I see, and we're on the ground basically when we're dealing with these things, and I want to spend a bit of time on this. When the pandemic hit, one of the key concerns that Canadians had was were export restrictions. India restricted paracetamol, acetaminophen, hydroxychloroquine very early in the pandemic for their own particular consumption. Those are a couple of drugs. It was very short term, but the truth of the matter is in Europe, the restrictions were even more broad-based and for longer. So although there were a couple from India, when we get into these situations, export restrictions is a risk to the trading between the two countries. The second issue was transportation, lack of flights. Because of all the travel restrictions, it was very difficult to ship product to Canada. And when we were doing so, we were doing it at a much higher cost. The third thing is that we're seeing a trend is toward onshoring. That's basically government trying to create incentives to move production locally in Canada. And that makes logical sense. Every country would like to be able to do so. But some of the rationale that's being presented is about drug shortages. We can't depend on foreign suppliers. Our experience is that rationale is not really true. Although there was a major surge in demand in drugs when the pandemic hit, I don't think even any domestic manufacturer would have been able to support that. India did a tremendous job in bringing products to the Canadian market. The Canadian government created something called a Tier 3 system to encourage drugs that were short for COVID out of Europe and the US. But the truth was, although we had 7 products approved on that list, there was no demand for any of those products. There were companies who brought product in and ultimately couldn't even sell it. So there was an exaggeration in the drug shortage situation. Really, it was very short term and very limited. And over the last 2 years, the supply has been tremendous out of India. They've done an excellent job. And actually, I think the pharmaceutical industry has done much better in global supply chain than a lot of other industries. And whatever drug shortages there were, and there will always be drug shortages by the nature of the products. Those are probably not much more than they would have been otherwise. The second point I wanted to make was the same governments who are encouraging onshoring are the ones that drop the price of generic drugs to such a point where Canadian companies were forced to buy product elsewhere, particularly from India. Just to give you an example, in 2006, generic drugs were priced at 70% of brand price, meaning if the brand drug sold for $1, the generic price was 70 cents. Today, that same drug and most drugs in the higher value segment of the market is only 10 cents. So large Canadian companies like Apotex and Pharmaceuticals, for example, went to India to produce their drugs to remain more competitive in the marketplace. And so the same governments who ironically want local production took a short-term view and drove the prices down to such an extent that there's been no major investment in Canadian pharmaceutical manufacturing capacity over the last 10 years. So until they're able to adjust the pricing economic model, onshoring is going to be very difficult to work. The third thing I want to point out is that unlike semiconductors, automobile, energy, food, every other sector who complain about supply chain and having higher prices, the pharmaceutical sector has had no price increase in the market. No drug price increase has been attributable to the supply chain and the pandemic. So I think that says a lot for our industry. Although our costs have gone up, the nature of the pricing system in Canada does not allow for increased prices. So in summary, despite India having a devastating amount of restrictions in terms of lockdowns, the amount of infection that was in India, which is certainly much more than has been reported, and the amount of death in India, despite what's been much more than what's been reported, Indian pharmaceutical industry was extremely resilient. They performed brilliantly, much even beyond my expectations, to be honest. And I think we should all have more confidence that India should be the place to get products from. which now leads me to my next point, which is Bill 12 in Quebec. This is a recent legislation that's been proposed by the Quebec government, which I think is very counterproductive for the most part. It provides exclusivity to Quebec and Canadian companies, and also provides them with differential pricing that they can get a higher price than an imported product. Although it's limited in scope right now, this type of legislation tends to be very nationalistic, and our concern is that it will spread across the country, and its scope will increase, putting Indian-based pharmaceuticals at a competitive disadvantage. So this is something that we as an industry need to look into, something I certainly have talked to Mr. Keon about. I think one thing that we need between Canada and India is a free trade agreement. We need to be able to access APIs and finished dosages from India. And a lack of free trade agreement puts us at risk. So I would encourage governments to get together and try to do this. Canada does have free trade agreements with the United States and Mexico. It does with the European Union. It's working on various Pacific trade agreements. It's time that Canada and India had one as well. Next slide, please. And I just wanted to finally introduce Genova. Genova is a sister company of Marcan's, part of the MCure group. We have developed India's first mRNA vaccines, equivalent or alternative to Pfizer and Moderna, which is the preferred vaccine. We are in the final stage of approval in India, and we'll be launching this product very shortly. We have a current capacity of about 100 million for the local market and planning to expand that to over 1 billion vaccines, including Canada, with the eventual idea of getting this product approved in Canada. We believe our product has some advantages over the current Pfizer and Moderna products. So tremendous technology and work going on in India. And there is a possibility, and we are looking at potential production facility in Canada to support North American requirements, as we think our capacity in India may sell out over time. We also plan to bring biosimilars to the Canadian market as the market matures. And finally, I think the big opportunity in the future is that way India has become a pharmaceutical superpower, it will also become a vaccine superpower. Not only is Genova doing tremendous work in India, but companies like Serum Biotech and Biocon have a venture, Zydus, Dr. Reddy's. There's a lot of great innovative work going on in India, not only just for COVID-19, but to use vaccines for a lot of other ailments and diseases. And that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Atulbhai, for very detailed presentations and for the insights. Actually, it's very nice to hear about the work you are doing with India in this sector. I have 2 questions for you as well. Sure. Before we move to our next speaker, Mr. Akshay Lal, the first question for you is, if a Canadian company buys an Indian company, or if an Indian company buys a Canadian company, what is the difference between the two, especially in terms of the culture, working style and environment, ease of doing business, etc.? Or do these differences not matter anymore in today's globalized economy?
Well, I mean, how much time do we have? That's a good, really long answer, but I'll get to them. But there are cultural differences between the way Canadians do business and the way Indians do business. And, a lot of it has to do with transparency, providing accurate information. India, if they have bad news, you'd rather not share it. In Canadian cultures, if you don't hear anything, you assume everything is working perfectly fine. That's not always a good assumption. So that's just one example. So there are differences, but what I find is that senior management at large pharmaceutical companies in India, most of those people, most of the senior executive level are educated in the United States or Europe or Canada. They understand what the expectations of the customers are here, and they've altered their systems and the reporting. And I think things are getting much, much better now than they were 20 years ago. And with improved technology and communication, that's less and less of a problem. I think that's much more of a problem time ago, but there are differences, and I think part of why we've been successful is that we understand both cultures quite well, and we're able to bridge some of those differences.
Okay. And you were sourcing active pharmaceutical ingredients, as you mentioned, or APIs,
yes,
from India.
Yes.
So there seems to be an active interest from overseas to invest in this sector, API sector in India. Can you tell us a bit more about this, and what impact does the supply chain bottlenecks over the last 2 years have on API sourcing from India?
I think what's going on in the API market has been over time, there was a continual erosion in margins in the API industry. There was too many players, and what we found was many people exited. So there were a lot of shortages that came up in key drugs, and quality issues, and a lot of other factors were coming into play. So what we're finding is that for many key products, there are very, very few suppliers. And so there are opportunities, if you pick the right areas, to invest in capacities to develop many of those APIs and support the manufacturing of formulations. And many of the formulation companies decided to vertically integrate backwards by purchasing API companies to control supply. So I think those are the two things, but I believe there are opportunities in the API sector. I think the market has gone through quite a bit of a shakeout, and so if you're investing in the right place, it's a good opportunity for sure.
Thank you for that, Atulji. And we'll connect again for the follow-up in-person roundtable that we are putting together in April, hopefully, in Ottawa. So Tejas, if you can bring up our next speaker, please, Mr. Akshay Lal.
Okay, thank you. So our next speaker is Akshay Lal, president of Lal Pharmaceuticals, Inc. Akshay has 27 years of experience in the pharmaceutical industry, encompassing various corporate positions and entrepreneurship. He started his career in 1994 as a management trainee at Ranbaxy Laboratories in India, moved to Canada in 2001, and joined Pharmascience as their vice president of business development. After working for Pharmascience for 5 years, Akshay founded Lal Pharmaceuticals, Inc. in 2006. Lal Pharmaceuticals is a Montreal-based consulting firm offering business development services to North American and international companies. They continue to work with leading and upcoming North American and Indian pharmaceutical companies. Akshay has studied at St. Stephen's College, IIT Delhi, and IIFT Delhi. Akshay, over to you. Thank you.
From Montreal, Your Excellency, my fellow panelists, and all the people from all over the world who may be watching this event. My fellow panelists have covered some of the things I was going to speak about, so that helps me speed up my presentation. I know we are running late also. So let me just share with you some of my experiences of working both with the Indian side of the industry and the North American side of the industry, as well as some of the big changes that I see and the big trends I see that are emerging that are very exciting going into the future. So just to share with you my personal insight of having started my career at Ranbaxy in the mid-90s. At that time, one of our biggest challenges in the North American market, especially in the US, was to make our business partners agree to mentioning made in India on product labels that were to be sold in the US. And to now see the made in India label as an established label, not just in the US, but all over the world, just makes me so proud and happy of the progress that the Indian pharmaceutical industry as a whole has made. And I want to highlight this, that it is very important for the current generation in India to vigorously defend this hard-earned reputation for quality and reliability. And you must build on the strong foundation that was provided by the previous generation. Now, my co-panelists have mentioned how India has become a hub for global generic manufacturing. I won't spend a lot of time on that. We've also spoken about vaccines. I would like to highlight the clinical research services that have established itself as a very important business in India. And just to give you an example about one of our clients in India, this company was established 14 years ago. They have successfully been inspected by US FDA 11 times in those 14 years. They have submitted 1,500 pivotal biostudies all over the world, 500 pivotal biostudies successfully submitted in the US. So that just gives you an example of the kind of capability and experience that exists in India. Now, for people who are not very familiar with the Indian pharmaceutical industry, I just want to mention why the Indian industry has done so well. When you compare India to all the other pharma industries, India has a unique combination of strengths that I don't see anywhere else in the world. And I'll just quickly mention a few. There's the obvious cost competitiveness and the vast pool of talent. There is excellence in reverse engineering and process development. There is backward integration. Over the last 2-3 decades, there's also a large number of people who understand international markets very well. There is the obvious advantage of English language and the legal system, especially for any Canadians listening to this event. The Indian legal system is very similar to the Canadian legal system because it is based on the English common law. Now, I want to mention about Indian pharma and how well they have done in the Canadian market. Just to share with you, Canada is a top 10 global market. When I look at the figures of Indian pharmaceutical exports to North America in the last year, I see that in the US, they grew by 12%, while in Canada, they grew by 30%. So like Atul mentioned, Canada continues to import a large amount of its finished products and APIs from India. When you look at the data on the fastest growing companies in Canada in the last 5 years, Marcan is right on top with almost 35% growth, along with Oro, which is Aurobindo, and Jamp. And the one common thread you see in all these companies is either they are Indian owned or have an extensive network of licensing and sourcing relationships in India. So that just shows you the scope of what is possible between India and Canada. I would also like to mention something that the Canada's generic penetration is just around 70% compared to 90-95% in the US. And this is something my co-panelist, Jim Keown, does an excellent job of mentioning, because there are a lot of savings for Canadians to be achieved there by increasing that generic penetration. And I also want to highlight something about Health Canada approvals. The process itself over the years has become very quick and efficient. It's pretty common to have NOC approvals within a year. The cost of Canadian approvals and the review fees, it's much lower compared to what we see under GDUFA in the US. And just to tell you something, one of our clients in India had their manufacturing facility for injectables approved by Health Canada just on the basis of their US FDA and EU GMP approvals. So they didn't even need to have their site inspected by Health Canada. Now, this is the other trend I'm noticing, and this is something new for me because I'm seeing a growing interest from North American private equity clients that we have in the Indian market. So far, most of the discussions we used to have and the investments that we've been involved in have had to do with North American companies or business opportunities which involve sourcing products and licensing products out of India. Now, more and more, I'm hearing about India as a pharmaceutical market. And the reason for that is very clear. If you notice the projections, and some of these were shared by my co-panelists, India is currently the 13th largest global market in pharmaceuticals. Over the next 5 years, it is projected to become a top 10 market. And by the end of this decade, the projections suggest that it will be a top 5 global market in terms of value. When you look at medical devices, the expected growth is going to be exponential. They're saying from about 10 billion a year ago, it's going to be $50 billion US by the year 2025. So now you know why people are beginning to talk about this and get very excited about doing business in the Indian market. And I predict that over the coming years, you will have substantial investments headed the other way, and also a lot of licensing and manufacturing deals where technology intensive North American and European companies will be either establishing base in India to sell these products or getting into relationships with leading Indian companies to find sales and distribution partners in India. I also want to highlight some of the great initiatives that have been taken by the Indian government. This strong push towards Make in India is an excellent idea. The ease of doing business has been appreciated by international companies. The encouragement towards 100% FDI in new projects in different fields, pharmaceuticals, medical devices, is very encouraging. The improving infrastructure was required for a very long time, and we are noticing the new airports and all the benefits that come with that. And of course, we noticed that there was a 5-year outlay announced last year where Indian API companies are being encouraged to start investing in intermediate production. Now, while I'm on the subject of the Indian government, I would also like to share some suggestions. And again, some of these have come from our Indian clients. One has to do with the US market. We would really appreciate if the Indian government could persuade the US government to make India a TAA designate country. This would allow Indian companies to participate in government supply contracts in the US, which will be a big opportunity for Indian companies. And we would also we are noticing that if there are products that are launched in international markets and not launched in India, we would urge the Indian government to come up with a new law that would allow domestic companies to manufacture and market new products without requiring compulsory licenses from international companies. I realize this is easier said than done, but seeing the need, the growing need, and some of my co-panelists have mentioned about the disease patterns that are emerging in India, this would be very good for the healthcare of Indian citizens. Without taking any more time, I would like to thank you for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Akshay, for wonderful remarks and those fantastic suggestions. I hope the government of India take it up with the US to make it easier for the Indian companies. Lester, we are just coming to you. Apologies for the delay. Actually, I have seen now for the last, I would say 2 or 3 Make in India conferences. It always ends up, about 2.5 to 3 hours. So the, fantastic presentations, fantastic remarks. So I guess we'll just now keep the format for 3 hours instead of 2 or 2.5. Okay, so my first question to Akshay ji is, you are offering consulting to North American pharma companies. What can you share about the emerging trends and priorities in the global pharma sector? And where do you see India in this? Akshay ji, 2 questions for you. Then we go to Lester Fernandez. Akshay ji, are you there?
You're mute. Or rather, we can't hear you. No. Yes, just speak up a bit loud, higher.
We work very closely with companies in North America, India, and also we work with private equity firms. Hello?
Okay.
Go ahead.
And we are noticing this growing trend, and you will see more and more of this. First of all, just make in India. I'll give you an example. I was speaking to the head of a market leader in the US, a pharmaceutical company, and I wanted to introduce a new company to them, and an injectable company. And the first comment and question he had was, I hope it's an Indian company. So that obviously was very heartening for me because it was. And his comment was, I prefer dealing with Indians because then I am assured of competitiveness. So there itself, in a nutshell, you understand why the Indian industry has done so well and will continue to do so well.
Okay. What, according to you, are the pluses and minuses for India and Canada in the pharma sector? And where do you see potential synergies or areas for collaboration?
I think, you know, what people like Atul have shown is the extent to which this relationship can be leveraged. And Atul's experience has been a very successful experience of working together with Indian companies and creating these licensing and sourcing relationships. So there it is I think that is something that has been exploited. The Indian pharmaceutical industry and the Canadian market have been engaged together for a very long time, and it's not something new. So they're very familiar with each other. Even Canadian owned companies have been dealing with Indian suppliers for more than 2-3 decades now. So it's a very well established relationship.
Okay, thank you for that. Tejas, can we move to our last speaker for the day? So Lester Fernandez from ICICI Bank Canada.
Yeah. So our next speaker is Lester Fernandez, head of corporate and commercial banking, ICICI Bank Canada. Lester manages over $2.4 billion Canadian of the bank's corporate and commercial banking portfolio in Canada. Established in December 2003, ICICI Bank Canada, or ICICI Canada for sure, is a full-service direct bank with an asset base of about 6.2 billion Canadian dollars as of December 31st, 2020, and is a subsidiary of ICICI Bank Limited. ICICI Canada extends necessary support not just to the organizations planning to set shop or trade in Canada or India, but also offers tailor-made solutions to suit the employees of such organizations on both sides of the corridor. Mr. Fernandez has vast experience in the financial services industry with a career spanning over 20 years across Asia and North America, and was a core member responsible for growing the bank's Canadian corporate and commercial portfolio since 2006. Lester, over to you.
Thank you, Tejas and Vipul, and thank you for this opportunity. I'll quickly share my screen. Please let me know once it's visible.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so thank you. I'm really honored to speak at this forum with such prominent speakers. So I think we can all agree that India is one of the best emerging markets, and we have seen a plethora of Canadian companies as well as pension funds betting heavily on India. The Make in India campaign is focused on attracting foreign investment, boosting the private sector, and enhancing India's overall competitiveness. What better sector than India's healthcare market, which is the third largest in the world in terms of volume and 14th in terms of value. Over the last few years, India has conducted remarkable reforms and improved its ranking in the index of doing business. I think some of my panelists mentioned this, jumping from 233 from 142 over a 5-year period. We have now seen India emerge as the #1 global destination, not only inviting foreign companies to set up local offices or subsidiaries in India, but also setting up global innovation and capability centers, global research and development centers in India. These centers trap the tremendous talent pool in India and also serve the global requirements of MNCs, not just for India. So how can we help? We at ICICI Bank have assisted many Canadian companies looking to enter and set up businesses in India. I will give you a brief perspective of ICICI's scale in India, our operations in Canada, and areas that we can work together. The bank is one of the largest private banks in India with total assets of around 225 billion and a market cap of about 67 billion. ICICI Bank currently has a network of around 5,000 branches, 15,000 ATMs across India, 85,000 employees catering to 37 million customers. Yes, that's more than the population of Canada. We have a wide presence across the globe. ICICI Bank is headquartered in Toronto in Canada and a subsidiary of ICICI Bank India, and has been present over the last 19 years, catering primarily to businesses in the Canada-India corridor. Although we have physical presence in 3 provinces, we assist customers all across Canada, and we offer a wide range of products from loans, revolving lines, foreign exchange, trade finance, etc. The ICICI Group covers the entire suite of financial services, banking, insurance, private equity, investment banking, securities, wealth management, and occupies a leadership position in most of these segments. So every foreign company has many questions when they look to enter India and how to navigate the landscape. So we have something called Infinite India, which is an initiative from ICICI Bank to provide a one-stop solution to foreign entities. So Infinite India is the first of its kind solution in India, which brings all the pre and post incorporation services under one roof. So along with a tailor-made banking solution for foreign entities throughout its business lifecycle, be it assistance in setting up a business in India, to professional services or banking solutions. All information is available at a click of a button. As a bank, ICICI covers the entire gamut of financial products to serve you in Canada as well as in India. Having one of the largest treasuries in India, we have the ability to offer the best rates on dollar-rupee conversion, whether it's CAD or USD. Further, be it products to corporates or services to employees, we have banking solutions for every segment. So on the corporate side, we give you general banking services, transaction banking, as well as more complex related financing, M&A advisory, and global market products. We are very digitally savvy, and employees of your companies in India can also benefit from debit and credit cards, home and personal auto loans, demat and trading accounts, group medical insurance, as well as salary accounts. Now, coming specifically to the areas of healthcare and pharmaceuticals, most of my colleagues today have already covered what India has to offer in these sectors. So I will focus specifically on what ICICI Bank has to offer. So ICICI Bank has one of the largest exposures among the Indian banks to the drugs and pharmaceutical companies. One of the main reasons is that ICICI provides specific solutions for the pharma sector. ICICI Stack for Pharma sector provides end-to-end integration of manufacturing plants and R&D centers across India, thereby integrating payroll, SAP, payments, and collections. This also can be custom built according to individual company specifications. Dealer and vendor financing offers a complete digital product and provides financing to large dealers and vendors of pharma companies. We have a book of rupees 3 billion currently with major pharmaceutical companies in India in this segment. Last mile financing is a completely digital product which provides financing to chemists and stockists of pharma companies, while medical representatives financing provides pre-filled cards like prepaid cards, loyalty cards, primarily used for marketing, which will help MR sell drugs to doctors and clinics in India. So in closing, India remains an attractive destination, and ICICI Bank can serve you as your financial partner to navigate the Indian landscape. Thank you.
Thank you, Lester. It's not advisable to keep a banker waiting, which we unfortunately have to do today. as we went a bit over time. So here are two quick questions for Lester. While the bank has a very healthy balance sheet, healthcare costs these days make a mess of people's personal balance sheets. So how can ICICI Bank help people cope with the healthcare related costs and challenges, including Indians traveling to Canada and Canadians traveling to India?
Okay, so thanks for that question, Vipul. So on the personal side, we can be considered as one of the banks which is in the India-Canada corridor, and I can explain to you that something that we actually helped, NRIs in Canada during the pandemic. A lot of NRIs couldn't actually travel to India, and because of that, there was this severe challenge of having these NRI accounts, which is quite a tedious task. So sitting in Canada, a lot of non-resident Indians were able to actually open their accounts sitting in Canada and being able to transact with India. So that was a big help that, we extend ourselves during this pandemic. And now I'm happy to say that, a lot of the NRI community has actually taken help and taken us on that offer. And we have managed to, scale up the opening of NRI accounts sitting in Canada without actually having to physically travel to India. So we have a lot of digital sort of products to help you to satisfy those requirements.
Wonderful. And as we heard a little bit about medical tourism, it's catching up very well in India with more than 700,000 people visiting India in 2019 for that purpose, just before the pandemic. So how can the ICICI Bank help promote medical tourism and also assist people who are going to India for that purpose?
Okay, I may not have the full answer to this question, but in terms of when you're actually traveling to India, the rupee is not a freely convertible currency. So there are quite a few products that we can help to give you, while you're navigating India on the financing side. And I would encourage anybody who's actually traveling to, just give us a call, and we can help to assist in those requirements.
Okay, sure. So that concludes the remarks, actually individual remarks. And since we are over time, I will just have two quick questions as part of our panel, and anyone can answer. It's an open panel. The first one is Canada is now, or I believe, as far as I believe, maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong, it seems Canada is now recognizing foreign trained nurses to fill the vacancies in the Canadian healthcare system. Is this a stopgap arrangement, just pandemic related, or do we think this earlier assimilation of foreign trained nurses and doctors in the Canadian healthcare system is here to stay? Anyone can answer? Pradipbhai, Jim? Someone in the Canadian healthcare system may be better suited to answer that.
Maybe I can help out, since I'm chair of one of the local hospital here in Ottawa. I mean, the nursing shortage is acute, and there's not a substantial pipeline. Many nurses have left the profession and are never going to come back. So I believe this is just not a stopgap thing. I think there's a realization that there's not sufficient nurses, and getting well-trained nurses out of India or giving them qualifications is going to be the trend going forward. Nursing Association, they have a different opinion, but I think the need is there, and I think it will continue.
Okay, and the last question before I give my closing remarks. As my internet connection has shown today, actually it has happened for the first time actually in the last 3 years, but my internet went down. It has still not come back. I don't know when it will be back. So what it has shown is we rely too much on technology these days, the telephones, on virtual conferences. So it also has its own challenges. What impact can it have on different aspects of healthcare? Let's say e-health, telemedicine, virtual consulting with patients. Oh, I mean, is it advisable to rely so much upon it? As I think our reliance on this technology is going to grow more and more in the days to come. This applies to both Canada and India. Who wants to take it up? No one? Atul, maybe you can address it again.
I would suggest, yeah, Pradeep could probably answer that question better.
Sorry, I couldn't hear that.
Dr. Merchant may be a better person to answer that question.
I think Pradeep, because
If we can. You have to unmute yourself, sir.
You're on mute, Pradeep.
Okay, go ahead. Sorry. I was listening to something else. Go ahead.
Gokul, can you ask the question?
Yeah, so as I was saying, as my internet connection has shown today, it went down in the morning. It is still not back up. I am just connected on my smartphone. So that means we are relying too much these days on technology, right, for everything. So it also affects several aspects of the healthcare system, including e-health or sharing the data online, telemedicine, other healthcare services. A lot of virtual consultations going on now with patients. So is this over-reliance, which is expected to grow, I mean, is it healthy for the system itself?
Well, I think there are benefits and risk as well involved with it, because if you are overly relying on a technology, and if technology fails, things fail. I mean, the case in point about you today, you've been struggling with the technology and how things actually occur. Having said that, I think the broadband with the 5G and eventual evolution of how the networking and the IT sector is actually evolving, that is being addressed. We haven't seen a major disruption through the pandemic or through a reliance into it. Occasional disruption has occurred where, of course, our clients or our patients' internet wasn't working, but the hospital internet, most of the hospitals have a very strong IT department, and I don't think it has really affected our disruption of our service deliverables in a major way. But then Canada has to actually invest a lot more money into creating a healthy network across the country so that everybody actually have a better network access. As you know, in our northern community, we have really very poor network access. So if you're creating a telemedicine, we need to actually put a lot of money into creating. In contrast, India has a phenomenal network access. I mean, you can actually go to any corner of India and you can actually have a digital access to all the stuff. So yes, there is a lot of work needs to be done, and that's what the whole transformation is all about.
I'll add just one quick point to this. I think the biggest risk of at least in Canada that I can speak of the hospital sector is cybersecurity. The number of cyber attacks on hospitals in Canada is significant. And some hospitals have literally been virtually shut down, can't access records, information, and they're interconnected. So the cybersecurity issue is a big one in the hospital sector and the healthcare sector overall.
I agree.
It's the biggest number one risk that we have related to technology.
I agree.
Exactly. Okay, so thank you for Tejas. If you can bring up the last slide for our sponsors. So thank you for yet another fascinating conversation and exchange of ideas on a very critical and important sector. We are now putting together an in-person business leaders roundtable, as I mentioned, where we will invite all the speakers of the 4 bilateral conferences that we have done so far. So we can take these discussions to a meaningful, on-the-ground conclusion. Thank you once again to all our presenting sponsor Tangentia, as well as Skylink Capital Corporation, Seneca College, Efficience Canada, SBI Canada Bank, Om Hotel and Resort, Akal Insurance, ICICI Bank Canada, Natu Oil, One Place, and Pavi Bining plus of course the High Commissioner for their help and support. Because of my internet issues today, I could not ask questions to the High Commissioner. This session video will now be edited and posted on the IMEC YouTube channel, on the IMEC Facebook page, on our LinkedIn, Twitter, and all our other social media platforms, and will be shared with all the speakers as well sometime next week. So thank you everyone once again. The session is now formally closed.